Mike. Please give yourselves a round of applause for coming out on Friday morning, leaving your social media activation campaigns and 2 million impressions away. I like the fake military guy over here, by the way, the guy that just pretended like he was in the military to get some attention. But I want to thank everyone from Mike to Christy to Tyrone, so please give them a round of applause as well. This is truly a unique group of people. I speak at a lot of events, and I'm complimentary to everyone here. It seems like has a pretty straightforward agenda, and also a lot of people here, you're not tech fakers, where like you're on the west side where I live, and a lot of people like are actors with apps, and you come out and you're like, wait a second, what's going on here? So I'm here to talk to you about the influencer economy. This is my book. I just launched it in June. I'm happy to share it with you, and want to jump right in, and I'll tell you about the book in a moment, but who here has written a book? And anyone here written a book, and you realize that you have a lot of time? That's a lot of people have written books. What type of talks have you written on? Business mostly?
Mongolian history.
Mongolian history, the overachiever right here.
3D printing.
3D printing, that's relevant to this crowd. And what's another book title?
Design-driven startups.
Design for startups.
No. Design-driven startups.
Design-driven startups. Sudoku solutions. So very intellectual crowd here. A lot of PhDs. So when I was doing my book research, and it took about 2.5 years to write it, I had a lot of introspective self-reflection. And I used to do stand-up comedy, as mentioned by Mike in the intro. And what I realized doing stand-up is every profession I've had, I've pivoted my career many times, has provided lessons. With stand-up, it was all about putting myself out there, taking a risk, and taking a chance, like any entrepreneur or any creative professional in this day and age. And at the time of my life, I was actually clinically depressed when I was doing stand-up, and I worked at a nonprofit. Someone laugh. I've never had that reaction.
Good combo. Doing stand-up?
I stayed in my room a lot. I was very introverted. Not funny too. Oh, wow, this is a good crowd. So yeah, I'll pivot my story. So anyway, I learned a lot, and I ended up, taking a chance by performing, and I got myself out there, and I realized that over time, entrepreneurs and people that really want to thrive professionally, especially now in the digital age, you have to deal with a lot of rejection. And rejection is often like a badge of courage now with startup founders because they revise their history. Like how many of you have heard that entrepreneur narrative where, oh, I was at a crux of my life and I graduated business school and I was realizing I didn't want to work in banking again. And you're like, first world problem? How many people really have that as a narrative where they went to business school, they can make their own job and find their own career. But oftentimes rejection comes in ways where you don't get that call answered when you want to close the deal with a client. Or you go after an investor and you meet with 5 angel investors in Pasadena and everyone turns you down and no one understands but your spouse or significant other. And it came with me for stand-up comedy, so I always looked at open mic nights as a way to get better at my craft. And even though I would headline and perform at the DC Improv, I was always doing open mic nights to get better and practice in front of crowds. So after I went to the comedy world and I was still living in Washington, DC, I had a day job at a nonprofit. I had to pay my bills. And so I ultimately realized that stand-up comedy wasn't for me. I was a much better creative person, behind the scenes, so I wanted to get into independent filmmaking. And I started doing PA work on, anyone here watch The Wire? So I went to Baltimore and was a PA there in season 4. Remember the education season? Spoiler alert, they find a dead body in the house. I worked on that episode where they find this dead body. It's really, really masterful series if you haven't watched it. But what I realized, in working in entertainment was it's all about playing the long game. And oftentimes, so here's worked in Hollywood. And how many people got hired in front of you that you were more talented than, but they knew the right people? Hollywood's all about the relationship, and it's about the long game. And I ended up moving to LA with my then girlfriend, who's now my wife. And I had some great advice when I moved here. And someone told me Hollywood's all about attrition. And people who quit and move home to Kansas because they're not succeeding, or to Washington, D.C., wherever they're from, you jump their place in line the second they go home. And the same is true with entrepreneurship and technology and building an idea. Because as an entrepreneur, your drive and other people quitting is often the opportunity for you to persevere and keep going to the finish line. So I reinvented my career again. I was a millennial before millennials were millennials. I've had multiple lives as a professional. So I ended up getting into LA, and I realized business models were changing, and I worked for the TV show Ugly Betty. Do you remember that? Yeah. And so Funny or Die came to Ugly Betty to make funny videos around the characters on the show, making fun of some of their insecurities. And Ugly Betty's producers turned it down. They said, we can't make money on the web. Why are we ever going to post a video? What's a viral video going to do? Yeah. After hearing that conversation, I quit and went on a vacation and came back and got a job at a startup called Digison that was actually acquired by Disney a couple years later. And we launched a lot of Disney's social media tools and social media personas for Pixar and a lot of big brands within their parent company. And who here has worked for Disney? So they give you a silver pass, right? Where you get like you and 3 guests to go to Disney, which is sweet if you have 2 kids. But I was not married at the time. And unfortunately, who here works for a corporation? You are like, this guy's like embarrassed. He's like, me? What's your corporate job?
Creative director.
Creative director. He's like afraid to even say where he works. We'll leave you alone. But ultimately, corporations, there's something about creativity working fast that we lost when we were at Digison working for Disney. And Disney was a great experience. It's a great story I can tell for any job interviews or talks I give. But ultimately, I was tired. I was actually laid off. And long story short, anyone here read The Dip by Seth Godin? It's a great book. Seth Godin's a phenomenal author. And I ended up reading The Dip, and I was really inspired, by this business book, and I went in and asked for a raise from my boss and like demanded a review because I wasn't getting a review. And I ended up getting laid off like 3 months later. I was like, oh, okay. So maybe The Dip wasn't the right book to read. But actually, it really was a great moment of life because I cried in the parking lot after I got laid off, and I went to get a margarita with the guy I worked with, and then I ended up getting a job at machinima.com. And who here has heard of Machinima? It's a big gaming YouTube network where we would help Minecraft gamers and Call of Duty gamers upload videos to YouTube doing video game commentary. Sounds super geeky, but these kids were making 6 figures. So we would help empower them to make, quit their jobs at the Olive Garden or drop out of college to pursue a career in gaming. And ultimately, what I learned about that experience was that I got laid off and then I got a new job with a raise and I could double dip. So getting laid off isn't always the worst career move for you. And then finally I left Machinima to go to a startup called State.com, which you may not have heard of. It was a structured data semantic Twitter type platform where we used a database called Freebase. I'm getting technical for the tech folks. Freebase is a topic entity system where you can find topic entities and we would attach keywords for opinions. So you could say you innovate Pasadena you love or you can't stand, and then you could debate with people about those topics. So we raised about $14 million when we were based in London, and I did our US marketing. So finally, talking about the final stage of my career reinvention, I worked with these tech startups, and who here has worked for a startup with a crazy boss? Resoundingly everyone. Because startup companies often attract a certain type of person that we all are. Like we're all striving for something bigger, we're all creative, many are artistic. So I was burned out on that, so I ended up launching a podcast. At the time it was called Stories from the Influencer Economy. And I had a big vision. I wanted to write a book called theinfluencereconomy.com. So I started my podcast. We were new, noteworthy in Apple. I just published my book. We were top 50 creativity in Kindle. And then I went on a tour around the country. And I booked myself. I partnered with General Assembly, which is a startup education group. They have offices downtown in Santa Monica. And ultimately now I'm a contributor to HuffPost, and Inc. magazine featured me as a top 100 podcast to make you smarter, better, and brighter. And I've been able to reinvent my career by building a platform for myself. So ultimately, what I realized is I interviewed the likes of Seth Godin and Brad Feld, who founded Techstars, these world famous YouTubers. Like anyone here know who Freddie Wong is? Freddie Wong is a global YouTube sensation. His videos have been viewed over 1 billion times. If you were 13 to 21 and a male gamer, I guarantee this crowd would be 75% have heard of Freddie. Let alone they would have a line down the aisle waiting to shake his hand or get a selfie with him. But this guy, I had him on my podcast very early, and he's crowdfunded $2 million. He crowdfunded before crowdfunding was mainstream, before filmmakers like Spike Lee and Zac Efron were using the platforms. So ultimately, I talked to all these people. Like, anyone here, Troy Carter, he's an investor. He used to have managed Lady Gaga, and now he's an investor in Uber and started Lyft and based in Culver City. So I have 90 plus episodes, and I ended up publishing the book based on the steps I learned from these people. And realized you don't need an Ivy League degree anymore. Sorry, everyone from Harvard. You don't need a business school. Sorry, everyone from Anderson, UCLA. You don't need no celebrities anymore, because celebrities do not move the needle. And you don't need money like you used to, because the accessibility of technology is so much easier at your disposal. And so really you need to learn this framework that I believe I've applied to my own career as a guinea pig, and that I've actually reverse engineered the careers of all these big influencers to understand their steps. Because what I found out about influencers is, who here, just throw out, what's your definition of an influencer?
Somebody who changes things a lot.
Someone who inspires change in others.
So change is a common thread.
Someone with a lot of reach.
So a lot of reach.
Great distribution.
Great distribution. So reach, distribution, change, impact. What about people in the back? Vision.
Known authority.
Known authority. A leader.
Flip the status quo.
Flip the status quo. Trusted expert. So these are all a lot of synonyms. You like that one, trusted expert? This guy gave you like a fist pound, virtually. So ultimately, I define, based on talking to these influencers, is influencers create a movement. And they can turn something small overnight into a large, massive success. And we're no longer in the era of viral videos. Apps don't go viral anymore, products don't go viral. What I realized talking to influencers is they work very hard, persistently, building something they want to succeed, and over time, it happens. And the viral moments, if anyone in a meeting ever says they want a viral video, or they want you to hire them to make a viral video, like, walk out of the room. Because nothing is viral anymore. Like, the internet's too big, it's too massive, there's so much content. Like, meditation has become a larger trend now because we are inundated with so much information coming at us on so many different devices. So I realized that influencers, what they are, they're being an influencer, it's earned and it's learned. And ultimately, you can't rely on just thinking that you're not an influencer because you weren't born into a certain family, you didn't work at the right company, and then often you can create influence on your own. So today I'll be going into steps for how you all can reinvent your careers by defining influence in a specific business field. And I didn't mention this before, but the hashtag is IEatBook. So if anyone takes a photo on Twitter, I'll retweet them, and I'll make a page on my website, influencercomedy.com. So if you use Instagram, I'll embed all the photos and crowdsource them from the crowd. So IEatBook is the hashtag. So when I talk to all these influencers, like, I profile Nerdist in my book, and Mark Maron, WTF podcast, Freddie Wong, the Vlog Brothers on YouTube, all these people that may or may not have heard of, but I realized they had 3 steps. Because the influencers I was most interested in covering weren't business leaders. Like, I interviewed Derek Sivers and Seth Godin and all these tech influencers and leading minds, but their careers weren't interesting to me, right? They intentionally wanted to start a business. Most influencers on YouTube and podcast networks, they accidentally became successfof. So I found out that the 3 steps are launching, collaborating, and thriving. And these are my book principles in emoji. So each of the chapters of the book is written to support the steps. And ultimately, this is who here is a millennial or identifies themselves as that generation? So you use emoji. Any of the rest of you know what they are? No, I'm kidding. So ultimately, the idea here is that you craft your big vision, you pick a platform, you book your own gigs and do every job, you adopt tech early. Every single influencer I talk to is curious about technology. You strive for authenticity, you collab, which the collaboration is a word that people use many times before I got here today. You capture lightning in a bottle, you meet people in real life, you open doors for others, you give people ownership of your idea. So the first step is launch, and people always ask me, why do I have Kanye West on my deck? Because he's a very polarizing figure. But for that very reason, this guy Flula on my podcast, anyone heard of Flula? He's a DJ, musician, really funny, crazy, out there guy from Germany. And he told me, unless you're Kanye West, no one cares if you make mistakes. And then if you're not launching, you're too late. And you can't get in the way of what you're doing, and you need to forget perfection. Because if you don't launch now, the person next to you is already honing their craft, and they're building their product or their idea, and they're already ahead of you. And I'm not a fear-mongering marketer. Like a lot of people, they're like, oh, you need to be on social media to reach an audience. I'm saying that the guy next to you that's building a similar product that already launched has that many connections he's built. He or she has already got their foot in the door with competitive investors or customers. So always think about launching your idea. And then the first trait of influencers is crafting a big vision. Who here's heard of the Vlog Brothers? Who here's been to VidCon? So VidCon is this massive, how would you explain VidCon?
It's not shortly. It's got a massive community of teenagers that follow YouTubers, and then there's an industry track that is about, how to monetize it.
So they have an industry track for people like brands and companies to figure out how to monetize online video, and they have massive teenage fans. So the community of YouTube fans come, and then they have YouTubers, all these big influencers. And so it's a 20,000 person conference at Anaheim. I went to the first one. It was in Century City at a hotel bar with less than 1,000 people in the ballroom of the Hyatt. And these guys, the Vlog Brothers, they started it. And they're a massive YouTube channel with 4 million subscribers, and 2 brothers that do videos with each other. And some are scientific and some are educational, others are entertaining and fun. What I realized about crafting a vision, so finding a vision is like a big thing, right? What kind of vision do you have is a question you often get. Or people judge you on your vision. And I found that influencers, they craft a vision in 2 ways. The first way is they just start making stuff. And they find purpose through making that thing. It could be building a tech project and getting the code up. It could be starting a blog on Tumblr with their idea to share it to the world. It could be the most basic thing like starting a YouTube channel, making vlog and videos for yourself about your idea to keep yourself focused and energized. And then just starting builds into a bigger idea and vision over time. Or you have people that have a big vision and then they pick smaller ideas to execute to get to their vision. So for my book, I had a big idea. I want to write the Influencer Economy book. I'm not a known author. I'm a marketer by trade. I had stand-up comedy in my background. There's no reason for me to write a book in the theoretical idea of book writing. So I created a podcast. It got my foot in the door with influencers like Seth Godin, who I really look up to, and helped me reach YouTubers like Freddie Wong, who are in the book, and Hank Green, the brother on the right. And I don't know if you can tell, but this is called How to Be a Nerd Fighter. So their whole community is about being a nerd fighter. And they're embracing their inner nerd. Because nerds and geeks have taken over the world. It used to be like, I wore these glasses in 5th grade and I got picked on. But now Warby Parker has made glasses more mainstream. So geeks and nerds are taking over the world. And always think about building your platform. That's step number 2. And a platform could be a tech idea. And it's no longer, hey, can I get coffee with you and pick your brain if you look up to an influencer or someone in your field? It's how can I collaborate with you? I have a platform. I have a tech product. Can you give me feedback? I have a podcast. Can you come on as a guest? I have a LinkedIn blog. Can I do a Q&A with you? All these little incremental steps. Like with my podcast, I would have no book. But without the book, I wouldn't have a podcast. And so that platform is imperative to start thinking about. It could be public speaking. It could be starting an event like Friday Coffee Meetups, where you can build a platform and meet people in person. It starts small and can end up big. Like I said, influencers change the world seemingly overnight. So this is my father-in-law, who I have an acrimonious relationship, to say the least. So he is a funny guy. He has a boiler repair company in North Carolina. And you can imagine how those conversations goes when I'm talking to him about the influencer economy. So one day he came to visit and I said, you know what? Let me tell you what I'm working on. I'm talking about building a platform. And he said, you know what? Like I do sales. That's my main lead generation is cold calling, building relationships. And he said, if you have a platform, you need to give people something they can't get anywhere else. You need to embrace your personality. And that's what people forget in the digital age. It's all about identity and who you are and embracing your personality and what makes you stand out. I always recommend people that want to become more influential, they find 3 ways to validate their platform based on who they are and their personality. Identity is all about what we are on the internet. That's why Freddie Wong, who's an Asian filmmaker, is so revered in the Asian film community, because you don't see Freddie Wong on TV. You don't see Freddie Wong in movies, but you see him on YouTube because it's an accessible network. And my father-in-law also told me you need to solve pain points for people and develop a knowledge or skill that most people don't have, and then share your ideas with them. So it's a Joe Moore platform rule. And then step 3 is booking your own gigs. I had to throw Jay-Z in the book somewhere. So Jay-Z, he's married to Bay. He's former owner of a basketball team. He's a sports agent now. He's Rockaware clothing company. He does every job. He used to sell CDs out of his car to make it in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. But this is before Brooklyn became hipster Brooklyn. This is back when Brooklyn, no one really wanted to visit. So he did it all. And ultimately he said, I'm a businessman, because he's a business comma man, right? Think of yourself as a business. You need to be a personality-driven media network. You need to think about yourself as a personal business. And I hate the word branding. I hate the word personal branding, but you got to think about who you are as an individual and embrace your personality. So Freddie Wong, an idea I have with him is technology. Always be curious about technology. Think about, not being a Snapchat influencer, but think about how you can acquire your emails. Emails are the lifeblood of an entrepreneur. You need to figure out how to build your list. Your list is credibility, because email goes away. I still check it in bed when I wake up. Who else does that? Don't be ashamed. Who else checks it in bed before they go to sleep? I mean, it's not healthy, but we do it. Collaborate is step number 2. And these are all my book covers. I actually have a private Facebook group that I consider as my alpha community, and I shared these book covers with them. So I threw out these covers for feedback. I used none of them because they didn't work. But without giving your community ownership of your work, it's never going to get better. Moreover, the people that shared the book cover feedback were the first people to write Amazon reviews for my book, because they're more invested and they want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
So authenticity, I hate this word and I love this word. It's so overused, but it means what it means. So strive for authenticity means finding the truth in what you do and standing for what you believe in, because that's what people respect in the long run. And this is my brother at Benihana. Who here likes Benihana? It's a great restaurant to some. I'm not a big fan. But ultimately, Benihana is a shared experience where you cook with your people at the table. So you got to cook with your community. Get that product feedback. Give people ownership, like I talk about. Collab with your community. Influencers, we're no longer in the era that you have to go on the Oprah Winfrey show. Oprah used to have the book club and she'd mint overnight successes. Twitter, the founders went on Oprah's show and it became a global phenomenon overnight. Now you build a platform, you get the influencer in your field to collaborate with you, you draft off their social proof. Because they're credible, they give the credibility to you. Seth Godin, who here reads Seth Godin's books? Like, he's a hero of mine. He never would have come on my podcast if I didn't have the social proof with other Derek Sivers type guests that were other authors. And so, in the collaborative stage, I also realized you never should be afraid to pivot. And you never be afraid to rebrand. I used to be called the Influencer Economy for my podcast. I'm now the Rhino Lab. It's a much better logo. I found that most influencers companies are 4 syllables or less, and they're hard consonants. WTF, Rooster Teeth, Rocket Jump. I love this guy.
I did technology in school, yeah.
Okay, I thought you were on Vine. And you're like, oh, I love this video. No, I'm just kidding. He's not, that was mad at me. Sorry. So I'm actually launching a school, and so I feel like this is platform building that people can learn from. And ultimately, it's about finding your big vision and growing your platforms and connect with influencers. And this is my big vision that just came on my book tour. I never envisioned I would get into online learning, but it's a field, and I hate the word disruption, but it's ripe for disruption because colleges are so expensive and it's inaccessible. So once you catch lightning in a bottle, chapter 7 is you keep collabing with influencers. You keep stepping up your game. You never stop collabing. Collab, collab, collab. Collab is a term YouTubers use. Let's say you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
What's it called? What's it about?
David Palmer Studio, one video about making art.
So he has an art YouTube channel. How many subscribers do you have?
Oh, I have no idea.
So let's say he has 1,000 subscribers. Let's say you have a YouTube channel. What's it called?
Friday morning coffee meetup.
So Friday morning coffee meetup, your YouTube channel. Let's say you have 1 million subscribers. So YouTubing and collabing means your art network, you open it up to this Friday morning coffee network, and you appear in his videos, and he appears in yours videos. And what happens is the 1 million subscriber person is going to drive subscribers to the smaller channel, and the smaller channel is actually going to drive niche subscribers in a specific vertical to the big YouTuber. And this is collabing. And this is how every YouTuber, every Instagrammer gets success, is they collab and they collab and they collab and they share each other's audiences and communities. So the step 3 is thriving. This is VidCon, the conference that I love to go to. Every influencer I talk to on the podcast is a giver. Everyone's a giver without hesitation. And they open doors for other people. And there's a great book by Adam Grant called Give and Take, where Adam Grant talks about how, anyone here read the book? He talks about how most of us are matchers, where you help me, I help you, quid pro quo, like let's scratch each other's backs. And takers are the people that you want to weed out of your company, you don't want to work with them, but you have to work with them because they're around. And givers, surprisingly, givers fail the most, but they also succeed the most. So when you give to be successful, you have to give with your own self-interest aligned. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with giving with your own self-interest aligned, because if you give just to give, it's not going to help your bottom line. And so influencers are always givers. I had 2 podcast subscribers at one point, and people would still come on my podcast that were influencers. They wanted a good conversation. They loved the big vision for the book. Again, the big vision. Always think about presenting a big vision to people, because that's what they want to believe in. You have to meet people in real life to become an influencer. You have to go to conferences and trade shows. Equally, you have to make the conference smaller. You have to do influencer lunches and dinners, and you have to plan events or attend events that are smaller around the conference, because VidCon is 20,000 people. It's so noisy. You can't go there without an objective, but you need to go and experience it in a smaller, like unconference style. And if you plan these events, and let's say the art channel and the coffee morning meetup channel on YouTube, let's say I plan a lunch and they do business together, it's going to come back to me. Subconsciously, people are going to realize, oh, I met at Ryan's lunch at VidCon, and that's what happens when you give to other people. And then finally, the last chapter is about giving ownership and collabing with your community. I keep reiterating that, and I love that people have said collab many times today, but you have to hand your brand over. And you talk about millennials now, they want to find a purpose with their job. And I hate the term millennial, so I try to avoid using it, but ultimately, they want purpose. They want to care about their job. And so that's the same thing you have to think about your brand. You have to hand it over to people. Like sharing my book cover with people was huge for my feedback to make my cover better. And moreover, I gave free copies of my book to people on my email list. And I asked people to find spelling errors and editing errors.
Oh my God.
And my wife said to me, "You're an idiot. Why would you give this book out for free? We've spent way too much money investing on editors for your book." And the first people to leave Amazon reviews and Goodreads reviews were my crowd editors. I'm going to speak in Ottawa, Canada in November. One of my crowd editors actually found me a speaking gig paid in Ottawa to go talk to a bunch of entrepreneurs. If I didn't share this and collaborate with this community earlier, or early, then I wouldn't have had the opportunities for myself. So I'm not saying go share your idea to everyone you meet and go show your PowerPoint deck to competitors. Collaborate. There's a difference between collaboration, because collaboration insinuates trust. Collaboration is more about trust and less about cold calling and emailing. And finally, this is my book. Feel free to buy it on Amazon. I bought a couple extra if you all want to check it out afterwards. And here's my influencer school. It's a 5-week program. I'm launching it next month. It's going to be in person for people in LA with coaching meetings and also weekly video chats that will also be on audio. And finally, I'm psyched about this. Like, this is just something that, I built an MVP on a podcast, minimum viable product, that then turned into a minimum viable product for my book, right? So I stacked the book on the podcast, and I booked my own tour with General Assembly, and I stacked my tour on that, and now the school is coming off that. So you can never undervalue the smaller projects to build your platform and where they'll go. And that's why I think it's such an exciting time to be part of groups like these, because you don't know where these conversations will end up just by putting yourself out there. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ryan, so much. That was an amazing presentation. A lot of toolkit information there. And we definitely feel your passion and your drive to succeed. And I think it's really cool how his business is evolving and expanding organically. I think that's just really amazing. I think that's something we could all learn from, especially the collaboration part. I think as entrepreneurs and startups, we're very concerned about protecting our baby. Here's a guy that's building his business by sharing it with the world. So I think that's really cool. We're going to open up to Q&A right now, so if you guys have questions, raise your hand. Comments will be saved for offline, so if you want to share stories or jokes with Ryan. You'll stick around for a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. So and then you get a chance to see a hard copy of his book. It's right here. If you guys are interested in picking one up. Are you selling it?
I am, yeah, I brought a couple extra, so if you want to buy one, please stop by and say hi.
Awesome. Okay, John's going to walk around with the mic. Raise your hand.
All right, we only have time for 2 questions, so I'm going to get these 2.
You mentioned giving your community some kind of ownership or influence. Does it ever go wrong? That is, they feel they have ownership and then they feel you're not listening to them, and so they turn against you.
Yeah, actually, I had this private Facebook group, and I was going to rename my podcast the Rhino Lab a year and a half ago. And my wife's like, why are you asking for community feedback on this? And the logo is so different than a business logo. It's more something you wear on a t-shirt, which is the goal. It's more accessible. And everyone told me not to do it. And so I listened to them, and I waited until the book came out to launch it. So I think, like in that moment, I was going to do it anyway, and I thought that it was more beneficial to be patient. But my thought is that you need to listen to your community. You don't have to agree with them. And then you have to think about a conversation to have with them. And Twitter, for example, launched with no hashtags or responses. And both those product features were suggested by community members. And both those product features, Biz Stone and Ev Williams, thought were stupid. They thought they were dumb product features. No one ever hashtagged. And now hashtags are ubiquitous, and app replies are on every social media platform. So I think you just have to have a conversation at the very least to show you're listening. It's like anyone that gives you feedback. The second you dismiss it, then they become more standoffish and in person. And you have to think of your community as like a global entity that is like a person.
I wanted to say I really appreciate your outline of a trajectory, a successful trajectory, and I really like your observation about the names with the hard consonants. But my question for you is, what's your advice for someone who has fallen off of that trajectory or hit stumbling blocks and hasn't been successful in, say, launching or the collaboration phases? What do? You talk about pivoting, so I'm sure you have some experience in changing tech, and I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid to pivot because they're perceived as a failure. Because we have a misnomer of a narrative that comes from Silicon Valley and communities like that you pivot and your idea is not worth anything. But if you look at tech companies like Instagram was originally a location check-in app like Foursquare, and they pivoted when it didn't work. And Twitter was initially a podcasting platform called Audio, and they pivoted because they didn't get the right feedback. So I'm all about like getting market research like from day one. And so, for example, with the Influencer School, when I went on my book tour, people bought the book and I would be in line and people would say, hey, I have a question for you about, collaborating with YouTube influencers. And I would say, look, thank you for buying the book. Let's do a free Skype call when I'm back in LA. And from that, I asked people what their problems were with launching their business, and that's baked into the course. So I feel like it's never too early to find people's problem language. So if you're trying to solve a bigger issue and you have an idea that you want to execute on, find the problem language of people that are in the industry that could be your future customers, your community members, or your partners, and then cater what you're building around that. And if the idea is not working, then, in the end, you have to figure out, is it worth pivoting? And the second thought is, don't quit your day job if you have one, because oftentimes people quit their day job and they lose runway, and they lose the opportunity to have a business, so they force their product to make decisions too early in the process to make money or to scale when they're not ready for it, and so their business idea fails. And there's a great guy named Scott Belsky who wrote a book called Making Ideas Happen. He talks about how it's no longer an idea meritocracy, that the best ideas don't shine. It's often the best people that set themselves up to succeed. And so I feel like it's always a great idea to go out and get market research done, And if your idea is not working and you're like, there's no problem here, then it's worth pivoting and thinking about that.
What was that book called?
Making Ideas Happen. Podcast episode 72.
I'm sorry, this presentation went a little long, but it was great.
Sorry.
No, it's lots of really great information. We appreciate it. We're going to close up the Q&A section now, but if you have questions, come up to the stage afterwards. Ryan will...
I'll be here for the next hour, actually. I booked it. So.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, booked it. Great.
I booked it. No, I love it.
He's got his gigs.
It's a comedy gig. I got the light from the corner. 5 minutes.
Okay, before we adjourn, we're just going to get a photo of you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. A round of applause for the Q&A section.